I was disowned for chasing my dreams, and they called me selfish, while loyal child sister got everything. Now I'm the villain in their story, and then, for as long as I can remember, I've been the go-to person. In my family, need someone to pick up groceries? Call me something. Broken in the house, Ethan can fix it. My dad. Greg leaned on me for everything, and Sophia, my younger sister. She somehow managed to slip through life, without lifting a finger. That's just the way it was. By the time I was 20, I had already put my life on hold to help out at home. College plans delayed social life, non-existent career goals. Pushed aside, it was all about keeping things running smoothly for my dad and Sophia. I thought it was just what families did, but as the years dragged on, it started to feel less like being there for family and more like being stuck. When I turned 32, everything changed. A job offer came through a management position in Chicago. It was the kind of opportunity I dreamed about, the kind of role I'd worked years to achieve. I felt a spark I hadn't felt in forever. For once, I saw the way out of the endless cycle. I was nervous about telling Greg, but I thought he'd understand. I've been carrying so much for so long, surely he'd be proud of me. Right? I decided to break the news over dinner that night. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. The body room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge. My hands felt clammy, but I pushed through. Dad, I need to tell you something. I got a job offer in Chicago. It's a big opportunity. They want me to start next month. Greg stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he put down his fork and leaned back in his chair. So you're just leaving? Walking out on us? His voice was calm, but I could feel the storm brewing underneath. It's not like that, I said quickly. I've been here all this time, helping out, making sure everything's okay. This job, it's what I've been working toward. It's not just a job, Dad. It's a career. Greg's face hardened. Family comes first. Ethan, always. What happened to that? What happened to everything I taught you? I felt my chest tighten. Dad, this isn't about leaving you behind. I've been here my whole life. I've given up so much to help out, but I can't stay in this town forever. His hands slammed down on the table, rattling the silverware. You're abandoning your responsibilities. This family has a tradition of sticking together, and you're breaking that. You're choosing yourself over us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing was, he's serious. Did he really not see all the sacrifices I'd made? It's not about choosing Dad. I need to do this for me. For my future. Greg didn't respond right away. He just stared at me. His jaw clenched. Then he stood up, shaking his head. If you leave, don't bother coming back, he said. You're making it clear where your priorities lie. I was stunned. I sat there, as he walked out of the room feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The next few days were a blur. Greg refused to talk to me, and when I tried to bring it up again, he shut me down completely. Meanwhile, Sophia, who hadn't contributed much to the household in years, suddenly started spending more time with him. I heard through a cousin that she was moving back into the house. Rentrée, no questions. Asked the day I packed up my things and left for Chicago. Greg didn't even say goodbye. Sophia didn't either. As I drove out of town, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I was finally breaking free. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving behind a part of myself. Chicago was everything I'd hoped it would be: bustling streets, endless opportunities, a chance to start fresh. But the fallout for my decision followed me like a shadow. I learned through relatives that Greg was telling anyone who would listen that I'd abandoned the family Ethans. Selfish. He'd say he left us to fend for ourselves. Sophia's the only one I can count on. Sophia played right into it. She posted photos of her and Greg on social media, all smiles and captions, like "family is everything." It felt like a slap in the face. I was the one who had always been there, the one who sacrificed the most. But now I was the bad guy. Friends started messaging me, asking why I'd left. Even some relatives reached out to tell me I'd made a mistake. It was like no one understood why I had to leave. Why staying wasn't an option. Anymore, the breaking point came at a family event I didn't even know about, until I saw the photos online. There was Greg standing in the middle of a crowd raising a glass. "I've got a family I can count on," he announced, according to one of my cousins. Sophia has always been there for me, not like Ethan. When I heard that, something in me snapped. I'd given up so much for that family, and now I was being painted as the villain. I thought about reaching out, about trying to explain my side. But every time I considered it, I remembered Greg's words. "Don't bother coming back in Chicago." I was trying to build a new life. But the weight of it all was crushing me. The guilt, the anger, the betrayal. It was too much. I started questioning. Everything was, I wrong to leave? Should I have stayed? Even if it meant giving up my dreams. I didn't have. The answers. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Moving to Chicago was supposed to be a fresh start. But the fallout from leaving my family hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just about being in a new city or starting a new job. It was the constant nagging feeling that I had left something unfinished back home. Something that was unraveling faster than I could keep track of. At first, I tried to focus on my new life. My apartment was small but cozy, and the city buzzed with opportunities. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the echoes of Greg's words. But no matter how hard I worked, or how late I stayed at the office, the shadows of what I'd left behind crept. In the first sign that things were worse than I thought came from a text message. It was from a cousin back home, someone I hadn't heard from in months. "Hey, Ethan just wanted to let you know. Your dad's been saying some stuff about you. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "What kind of stuff?" The reply came quickly. "He's telling people you abandoned. The family that you left him and Sophia to handle everything. I thought you should know." My stomach sank. It wasn't just Greg refusing to speak to me. He was actively turning the family against me. Later that week, I got a call from Jake, my best friend in Chicago. He'd been a solid support system since I moved, always ready with a drink and some advice when I needed it. "Man, you got to see this," Jake said, sending me a link to Sophia's latest post. I clicked it and felt my blood boil. It was a picture of her and Greg smiling in front of the house I'd grown up in. The caption read, "Family is everything. Some people forget that, but we never will." Jake shook his head when I looked up from my phone. "They're really going all in. Huh, it's like they're rubbing it in," I said, tossing my phone onto the table. "She's living rentree with my dad playing the perfect daughter, while I'm here busting my ass to make something of myself, and everyone thinks I'm the bad guy." Jake poured me another drink. "Forget them, man. You're doing what you need to do. Let them talk." But it wasn't that easy. Relatives started calling me, some to lecture others, to guilt trip. One uncle said, "You know, Ethan family is all we have. Your dad's hurt. Maybe you should apologize and go back home." Apologize for what? For trying to build a life, for taking an opportunity. I'd worked years to earn. The tipping point came when I heard about a family barbecue back home. I hadn't been invited, of course, But the photos made their way to my feet. There was Greg at the center, holding court, like the proud patriarch with Sophia by his side. I stared at the pictures longer than I should have. Everyone looked so happy, like they'd all moved on without me. Jake found me staring at my phone that night. "Ethan, you've got to stop letting this get to you." He said, "They're doing this to get under your skin. Don't let them win." "I know," I said, "but it feels like I'm being erased, like everything I did for them didn't matter. You can't change how they see things." Jake said, "But you can control what you do next. Focus on your life here. Let them deal with their own mess." It was good advice, but harder to follow than I expected every time. I thought I was making progress. Something pulled me back. Like the time Aunt Linda reached out, she was one of the few relatives who had always supported me. "I don't know how you've stayed so calm." She said over the phone, "I saw what your dad posted in the family chat. He called you selfish and lazy after everything you've done for him." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. "What did he say exactly?" "He told everyone that you left the family to fend for themselves, that Sophia is the only one who's ever been loyal." "It's not right, Ethan. You deserve better." Hearing that hurt more than I wanted to admit. Aunt Linda meant well, but every word felt like salt in an open wound. I decided to try reaching out to Greg one more time. Maybe if I explained everything, if I laid it all out, I finally understood. I spent hours crafting an email where I detailed every sacrifice I had made and how I had always put my family's needs before my own. I poured everything into it, hoping it might change things. Instead, it only made matters worse. Greg forwarded the email to the entire family, twisting my words to make me seem even worse. He told everyone that I was playing the victim, trying to guilt-trip him into forgiving me. The consequences were immediate. Relatives who had stayed neutral before now turned against me. My phone flooded with messages, most of them angry or disappointed. "Ethan, how could you write something like that?" one cousin asked. "Your dad's been through so much. Have some respect." I couldn't believe it. No matter what I did or said, I was painted as the villain in their story. Sophia, of course, seized the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. She began posting vague messages on Instagram about ungrateful siblings and how true family shows up when it counts. She knew exactly what she was doing, and it worked. People began messaging me, asking why I couldn't just be there for my family. I wanted to scream. I had been there for years. I had put my life on hold for them, and now that I was finally doing something for myself, I was the bad guy. One day, Jake sat me down and said, "Ethan, you can't keep living like this. You're letting them control your life from miles away. Cut them off if you need to, but stop letting them drag you down." He was right, but it was easier said than done. The words of my family lingered in my mind, no matter how hard I tried to shake them. The guilt, the anger, the frustration, it was all consuming. I wasn't sure how to fix things or if I even should. All I knew was that the weight of it all was unbearable, and I wasn't sure how much more I could handle. The longer I stayed in Chicago, the more I realized that no matter how far I went, the mess I'd left behind wasn't going to stay there. The weight of it all, Greg's accusations, Sophia's antics, the whispers from relatives, followed me like a dark cloud. I knew I couldn't ignore it forever, so I decided to confront Greg. I spent weeks rehearsing what I would say, practicing how to stay calm. I thought that maybe if I spoke to him and explained myself, he'd finally understand where I was coming from. When I called him, the conversation ended before it even began. "Dad, it's me," I said cautiously. What do you want?" His voice was cold, as if I were just another telemarketer interrupting his day. "I just wanted to talk and clear the air," I said. "This whole situation has gotten out of hand, and I think we need to—" "I don't need to do anything, Ethan," he cut me off. "You made your choice when you left. Now you have to live with it." "It wasn't about leaving you behind," I tried to explain, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay composed. "It was about taking a chance to build a future. I've been there for you and Sophia my whole life. You can't act like I just walked away without thinking." Greg scoffed. "You're playing the victim as usual. Poor Ethan, the one who had to sacrifice everything. Do you even hear yourself?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, you don't get it. I delayed college to help with bills. I stayed in that house for years, fixing things, running errands, making sure you and Sophia were okay. And now she's living with you doing nothing, while you act like she's the hero and I'm the villain." "Don't you dare bring Sophia into this," he snapped. "She's been here when it counts, unlike you." The anger I had been holding back erupted. "What does she even do, Dad?" I demanded. "She posts pictures online and pretends she's the perfect daughter, while I'm out here trying to make something of myself." "Enough!" Greg shouted. "I don't have time for this. You're selfish, Ethan, and you always have been. Don't call me again unless you're ready to apologize." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been hit in the stomach. Later that evening, Sophia decided to add her voice to the mix. She sent me a long message, scolding me for leaving her to handle everything with Dad. "Do you know how hard it's been for me?" she wrote. "I'm the one who's actually here, dealing with everything. You wouldn't understand because you ran away." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Sophia had done nothing for years. I was the one who stayed behind, holding everything together while she lived a carefree life. And now she had the nerve to paint herself as the martyr. I ignored her message, but she didn't stop. The next day, I saw another post of hers on Instagram. "It's hard being the only one who cares, but some of us know what family really means." Relatives started reaching out again, picking sides. Some supported me, saying they understood why I left, but others echoed Greg's sentiments, calling me selfish and ungrateful. "You abandoned your family," one wrote. "No one forced you to leave. You chose this." The divide was growing, and it felt like I was standing in the middle of a battlefield, being attacked from all sides. Then, to make matters worse, a cousin sent me screenshots of text messages between Greg and other relatives. In these messages, Greg called me lazy, entitled, and ungrateful. "He left us high and dry," one text read. "Sophia's the only one who cares about this family. Ethan's too busy chasing his dreams to bother with us anymore." I couldn't believe it. This was the man I had spent my entire life trying to support. The man I had sacrificed so much for. And now he was turning everyone against me, twisting the truth to make me the villain. I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. I wrote an email to Greg, listing everything I had done for the family, every sacrifice, every late night spent helping out, every dream I had put on hold. I wasn't trying to guilt him. I just wanted him to understand. But instead of replying to me, Greg forwarded the email to the entire family, adding his own commentary, claiming I was trying to manipulate him and make myself look like the victim. The fallout was immediate. My phone exploded with messages from angry relatives accusing me of causing drama and trying to make Greg look bad. "You've gone too far this time," one of them wrote. "Your dad doesn't deserve this." I felt suffocated. No matter what I did or said, the story was always the same. Ethan is the selfish one. Ethan is the problem. Sophia, of course, took the chance to fan the flames even further. She began posting vague messages on Instagram about certain people who couldn't handle the truth about family loyalty. It was obvious she was talking about me. I tried to disregard it, but then I learned something that pushed me to my breaking point. A cousin casually mentioned that Greg had given Sophia money to start a business, money he had refused to give me when I needed it for school years ago. I was shocked. Sophia, who had never lifted a finger to help anyone, was handed opportunities on a silver platter, while I had been left to fend for myself. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if leaving was a mistake. But then I thought about everything I had endured, everything I had sacrificed for a family that never appreciated me. Jake's words echoed in my mind. You can't keep letting them control your life. Cut them off if you need to. I wasn't ready to cut them off completely, not yet, but I began to realize that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix this. Greg and Sophia had already made their minds up about me, and nothing I did or said would change that. It was a hard truth to accept, but maybe it was time to stop trying to prove myself to people who didn't care. The more I distanced myself, the more the drama pulled me back in. It wasn't just Greg and Sophia anymore. Relatives started chiming in, voicing opinions as if they knew everything. It felt like the entire family had become a courtroom, and I was on trial for daring to live my life. Then came the news that pushed me over the edge. One day, my cousin Kelly called, hesitating before speaking. "Ethan, you should know that Sophia went through your old room," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "She threw away a lot of your things, old photos, letters, keepsakes. She called it cleaning, but it's obvious she didn't care about what she was throwing out." A wave of anger washed over me. Those weren't just things. They were pieces of my life, memories from my childhood that now felt a world away. Without hesitation, I called my mom, hoping she'd intervene. "Mom, you can't let her get away with this," I said. "Those were my things. She had no right to do that." My mom sighed, as if the situation were wearing her down. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know until it was too late. I didn't want to get in the middle of this." "That's not good enough," I snapped. "She doesn't get to destroy my stuff and walk away like it's nothing." "It's just a family matter, Ethan. You know how these things go," she said, brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. Family matter. That phrase had become an excuse for every toxic behavior I had endured. I confronted Sophia directly, sending her a message filled with barely contained rage. She responded almost immediately, dismissing me as though I were overreacting. "Relax, Ethan," she wrote. "Most of it was junk anyway. You left it behind, so I figured it didn't matter to you." Junk? That's how she described photos from my high school graduation, letters from friends I hadn't seen in years, and mementos from a life I had put on hold for the family. I couldn't let it go. Without warning, I drove back to the town I had tried so hard to leave behind. My plan was simple: retrieve whatever was left of my things and end this once and for all. When I arrived at Greg's house, I barely made it to the front door before he stopped me. He stood in the doorway, blocking my path like a guard protecting a fortress. "You don't belong here," he said flatly. "This is still my family's house." "I'm here for my stuff," I shot back, "and then I'll be gone." Greg folded his arms, refusing to move. "You gave up that right when you walked out on us. You don't live here anymore, Ethan. You don't get to just barge in whenever you feel like it." I tried to reason with him, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He refused to let me in, refusing even to acknowledge that my belongings had any worth. I could feel Sophia watching from the window, her silhouette barely visible through the curtains. She wasn't going to step in, not to defend herself or to help me. When I left that day, empty-handed and furious, I knew I couldn't just drop it. I contacted a lawyer to understand my options. I wasn't going to let them erase me from the family completely. Not like this. The lawyer explained my rights, but it wasn't going to be an easy battle. Even so, knowing I had some legal standing gave me a glimmer of hope. But Sophia wasn't done stirring the pot. She began spreading rumors that I was trying to sue Greg for money. Relatives started whispering, and before I knew it, the narrative had shifted again. Now, not only was I selfish, but I was also greedy. The only person who reached out to support me was Aunt Linda. She had always been the voice of reason in the midst of chaos. "Ethan, I'm so sorry for everything you're going through," she said. "But you have to know, this isn't new. Your dad has always favored Sophia because she's easier to control. She does what he wants without question." I nodded, even though her words hit hard. Hearing it aloud somehow made it worse, like all the years I had spent trying to prove myself to Greg had been for nothing. One day, while going through old messages, I found something that stopped me in my tracks. It was a text Greg had sent me years ago, back when I was still running errands for him and doing everything I could to keep the family going. In the message, he promised me the family home one day. "You've earned it, Ethan. You've always been the one to take care of things. This house will be yours." Looking back now, it seemed laughable. That promise had likely been a way to keep me tied to the house, to prevent me from leaving. Now it was clear that Sophia was being groomed to take my place. The final blow came when I learned that Greg had co-signed a loan for Sophia's failing business. This was the same man who had refused to help me pay for college, the one who had told me to figure things out on my own. Resentment began to build inside me, threatening to consume me. I wanted to confront them again, to demand answers, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. Greg and Sophia had already made their decision about who I was in their story. The selfish son, the absent sibling, the one who abandoned them when they needed me the most. I started pulling back, cutting off contact little by little. I couldn't keep fighting a battle I was destined to lose. I had spent my entire life trying to fix this family, but nothing ever changed. The more I focused on my own life, the clearer it became. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for people who didn't appreciate it. It was a painful realization, but it was necessary. I had tried to be everything they needed, but it was never enough. Now it was time to focus on what I needed, letting go of the past and starting to build a future that didn't rely on their approval. Months passed, and I tried to settle into a life that didn't include Greg or Sophia. It wasn't easy. Every so often, I'd hear something they said or did, another jab at my character, another reminder of how thoroughly they had painted me as the villain. But I kept my distance, determined to focus on myself for once. Then I received a call from Aunt Linda. Her tone was serious, almost hesitant. "Ethan, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your dad's health is declining. It's not looking good." I didn't know how to feel. Greg and I hadn't spoken in months, and the last conversation we had was nothing short of disastrous. Part of me thought maybe this was the push we needed to fix things. But another part of me, the part that had carried years of resentment, wondered, why bother? Relatives began pressuring me almost immediately. "Ethan, you should make amends," they urged. "He's your father. You don't want to regret this later." The word regret stuck with me. I didn't want to look back years from now and wonder if I had done enough. But the thought of stepping back into that toxic environment made my chest tighten. Still, I decided to go. I didn't call ahead or warn anyone. I just showed up at Greg's house. When I walked through the door, the tension hit me like a wall. The house looked different, older, as if it had aged along with its owner. Greg was lying in bed, looking frailer than I had ever seen him. His once commanding presence had Sophia sat at the kitchen table, absorbed in her phone, when she noticed me. Her eyes widened in shock before narrowing into a glare. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "I heard about Dad," I replied. "I wanted to check on him." Sophia scoffed. "Oh, now you care after leaving us to handle everything." I ignored her and walked into Greg's room. He looked up at me, his face neutral. "You decided to show up?" he asked flatly. "I'm here, aren't I?" I responded. "I thought maybe we could talk." Greg shook his head. "Talk about what? How you left? How you put yourself before this family?" I sighed, trying to remain calm. "Dad, I came because I heard you weren't doing well. I'm trying to do the right thing here. Can we just put everything aside for a moment?" But Greg wasn't ready to let go. He started listing every slight, every moment he believed I had failed him. Sophia joined in, accusing me of abandoning her when she needed me most. "You don't understand, do you?" I finally snapped. "I spent my whole life putting this family first. I stayed when I wanted to leave. I gave up chances to help you, and now, because I finally did something for myself, I'm the bad guy. Do you have any idea how unfair that is?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Ethan, you're not a saint. Stop acting like a victim." I turned to her, my voice steady. "I'm not acting like a victim. I'm telling the truth. You wouldn't know what that looks like because you've never sacrificed anything." The room fell silent, and it felt like all the pent-up tension over the years exploded, filling every corner of that house. That night, I left without any clearer resolution than when I arrived. Greg still saw me as a traitor, and Sophia was too focused on her own version of events to see the truth. A few weeks later, Greg passed away. The news hit me harder than I expected, not because we were close, but because it felt like the chance for any reconciliation had slammed shut forever. There would be no apology, no acknowledgement of the sacrifices I'd made. Then came the inheritance drama. I found out that Greg had left me more than I expected, including a portion of the family home. Sophia, predictably, was furious. "He manipulated Dad into changing the will," she told anyone who would listen. "He doesn't deserve a dime." But her accusations didn't stop there. She began telling relatives I had only returned to see Greg because I wanted the inheritance. It was another jab, another twist of the knife, but I didn't engage. I used the inheritance to settle old debts and invest in my future. It wasn't a fortune, but it gave me some breathing room. Meanwhile, Sophia's true nature began to surface. Relatives who had once sided with her started pulling away. "She's always been manipulative," one cousin admitted. "I just didn't see it until now." It was bittersweet. On one hand, it felt good to be validated, but on the other, it was too late to fix anything. Greg was gone, and the family dynamics were beyond repair. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped seeking their approval, stopped trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it. Instead, I focused on the life I was building. I surrounded myself with friends who felt more like family than Greg or Sophia ever had. I found peace in the small victories, making progress at work, finding a sense of belonging in Chicago, learning how to live without the constant burden of guilt. Looking back, I realized I had spent years trying to hold on to something that wasn't worth saving. The sacrifices I made, the pain I endured, it all taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away. I'll never forget the family I grew up with, but I no longer let them define me. I've moved on, and for the first time in years, I feel free.